The judge hadn't spoken yet, but I could already feel the verdict settling into the room. Richard sat 3 seats away from me, relaxed, one ankle resting on his knee, like this was a board meeting instead of the end of our marriage. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something that made him smile. Not a nervous smile, not even a pleased one. It was the smile of a man who had never walked into a room he didn't already own. I folded my hands in my lap so no one would see them shaken. "Ms. Hale," the judge said, her voice calm, measured. "You understand the proceedings today will determine asset division and custody, correct?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, loud enough that I was sure the court reporter could hear it too. Richard's attorney stood before I could blink. "Your Honor," Marcus Cole said, buttoning his jacket, "this case is, frankly, straightforward. My client has provided full financial disclosure. The defendant," he gestured toward me without looking, "has not." A murmur passed through the gallery. I stared straight ahead. "Mrs. Hale has failed to produce independent records," Marcus continued. "She claims ignorance of marital finances despite living a lifestyle funded by them. We believe this speaks to credibility." I swallowed. The judge turned her eyes to me. "Mrs. Hale?" I could feel it then, that expectation. The room waiting for me to break, to protest, to cry, to explain myself into a corner. "I understand," I said. Marcus paused, just for a second. "That's all?" he asked, eyebrows lifting. "You understand?" "Yes," I repeated. Richard finally looked at me then, confusion flickering across his face before smoothing back into confidence. He leaned toward Marcus and whispered something. Marcus nodded. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "given Mrs. Hale's emotional state and lack of preparation, we're requesting full custody. Joint custody would be destabilizing." I felt the air leave my lungs. "That's not," I started, then stopped myself. The judge's pen hovered above her notes. "On what grounds?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Emotional volatility, financial irresponsibility, and frankly, silence." He turned to me. "Mrs. Hale hasn't denied a single claim today." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said nothing. The judge studied me again, longer this time. "Mrs. Hale," she said carefully, "you are entitled to respond." I met her gaze. "Not yet." Richard laughed softly. He didn't even try to hide it. "Not yet?" Marcus echoed. "This isn't a suspense novel, Mrs. Hale." Something inside me tightened. I glanced at the evidence table, at the neat stack of documents Marcus had submitted, at the confidence with which they'd been placed there, at the single envelope beside my attorney, still sealed. The clerk shifted in her seat, frowning at her screen. "Your Honor," she said suddenly, "there's a discrepancy in Exhibit C." Marcus sighed. "It's a formatting issue, already addressed." The judge raised a hand. "One moment." She looked at the screen, then back at me. "Mrs. Hale," she said slowly, "is there a reason you haven't challenged any of this?" I took a breath. "Yes." "And that reason is—" I felt Richard's eyes burning into me now. I could almost hear him thinking, "She has nothing." I lifted my chin. "Because," I said quietly, "this isn't the part where the truth speaks." The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned back in her chair. "Very well," she said. "Proceed, Mr. Cole." Marcus smiled again, too quickly, and for the first time that morning, I knew something he didn't. Richard's sister took the stand like she belonged there. Veronica Hale wore a cream blazer and a smile that never reached her eyes. She nodded respectfully at the judge, then glanced at Richard, as if checking for approval. He gave her the smallest nod. Permission granted. "State your name for the record," Marcus said. "Veronica Hale," she replied. "I'm Richard's older sister." "And how long have you known the defendant?" She turned toward me, lips pursed. "Since Richard married her, almost 10 years. During that time," Marcus continued. "Did you observe her behavior within the marriage?" "Yes." I felt the word land like a blade. "And how would you describe it?" Veronica didn't hesitate. "Erratic, emotionally intense. Julia was dramatic." A few people in the gallery shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Marcus nodded sympathetically. "Can you give an example?" "She spent excessively," Veronica said. "Designer bags, spontaneous trips. Richard would complain, privately, of course, that he couldn't keep up." I stared at the wood grain of the table, counting the lines. "Did she contribute financially?" Marcus asked. "No," Veronica said. "Not meaningfully." I almost laughed. Almost. The judge glanced at me. "Mrs. Hale, you may respond after testimony." Veronica kept going. "She also avoided family gatherings, claimed anxiety." We all felt she was unstable. I felt my chest tighten. Unstable. Marcus turned toward the judge. "Given this pattern, we believe joint custody would be harmful." My attorney, Daniel, stood. "Objection. Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said. "Stick to direct observations." Veronica smiled, unbothered. "Of course. I directly observed Julia screaming at Richard over finances, crying, threatening to leave." I closed my eyes. "Because yes, I cried. I cried the night Richard cut off my credit card without warning. I cried when he told me I didn't need access to accounts because numbers stress you out. I cried when he said, 'You should be grateful I handle this.'" "Did you ever see her handle money responsibly?" Marcus asked. "No," Veronica said. "She never even knew what things cost." That part stung most, because it was true, by design. Marcus finished with a flourish. "No further questions." The judge looked at Daniel. "Cross." Daniel stood slowly, calm, measured. "Ms. Hale," he said, "you mentioned Julia spent excessively. Were you aware she didn't have access to marital bank accounts?" Veronica blinked. "Well, Richard handled those." "So she didn't have access?" "I suppose not directly." "And you said she avoided family gatherings. Were you aware she was advised by a doctor to limit exposure due to anxiety attacks?" Veronica stiffened. "I'm not aware of any diagnosis." "So when you labeled her unstable," Daniel said gently, "that was your personal interpretation." Marcus stood. "Objection. Argumentative." "Sustained," the judge said, but her eyes stayed on Veronica. Daniel nodded. "One last question. You said Julia never contributed financially. Were you aware she signed over her inheritance into a joint account at the start of the marriage?" Veronica's mouth opened, then closed. "I wasn't aware of that." The room shifted. Richard leaned forward. "That money was insignificant." Daniel turned to him. "You're not on the stand, Mr. Hale." The judge raised her eyebrow. "Mr. Hale, you will refrain from commentary." Richard leaned back, jaw tight. Veronica stepped down, her confidence gone. The judge looked at me again. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "you've been silent through some serious allegations." "Yes," I said. "Do you wish to clarify any of them?" I thought about the nights I stayed quiet, so fights wouldn't escalate. The years I let people misunderstand me, because correcting them felt dangerous. I met her gaze. Not yet. Richard exhaled sharply. This is ridiculous. The judge looked at him. What's ridiculous, Mr. Hale, is interrupting the court. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. I felt it then, the smallest shift. Not victory, but doubt. As the clerk called the next witness, Richard glanced back at me again. This time, his eyes searched my face. I gave him nothing. Inside I was counting. Not memories, not regrets, documents, dates, and the moment he would finally realize. He never knew who I became after I left. Marcus Cole didn't hide his irritation anymore. He paced in front of the bench like a man who'd expected applause and gotten silence instead. His voice sharpened, each word clipped and precise, the way men speak when they believe precision equals truth. Your Honor, he said, the pattern here is unmistakable. Mrs. Hale offers no rebuttal, no documentation, no narrative of her own. Silence, in this context, isn't dignity, it's evasion. I felt Daniel shift beside me, but I stayed still. The judge tilted her head slightly. Mr. Cole, silence is not evidence. No, Marcus said quickly, but it is absence, and absence matters. He turned toward me, finally looking directly at my face. Mrs. Hale, he said, softening his tone in a way that felt rehearsed. This is your opportunity to help yourself. Do you deny spending over $400,000 in discretionary purchases over the course of your marriage? $400,000. The number echoed through the room. I could hear murmurs now. Someone behind me whispered, "That's insane." I swallowed. I don't deny the number, I said. Marcus smiled. Thank you. But I deny the implication, I continued. His smile froze. The implication, I said carefully, that those purchases were voluntary. Marcus let out a small laugh. Voluntary? Are you suggesting someone forced you to buy luxury items? I looked at the judge. May I answer? She nodded. Briefly. I'm suggesting, I said, that I was never told no. Richard shifted in his seat. I was encouraged, I went on, because as long as I was spending what he approved, I wasn't asking questions. Marcus scoffed. That's a convenient rewrite. Objection, Daniel said. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Cole, ask a question. Marcus exhaled through his nose. Mrs. Hale, did you or did you not sign joint tax returns for the past 9 years? Yes. So you were aware of household income. I was aware of what I was shown. Marcus spread his hands. There it is. Vague. Non-committal. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest, the instinct to explain everything at once, to dump years of confusion and control onto the table and hope someone sorted it into truth. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do. I stopped. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Hale, are you finished? Yes. Marcus turned toward the bench. Your Honor, this illustrates our concern perfectly. Mrs. Hale offers fragments and insinuations, but no facts. The court cannot rule on vibes. A few people chuckled. The judge didn't. She tapped her pen once. Mr. Cole, mind your tone. Marcus stiffened. Apologies. She leaned forward. Mrs. Hale, one question from the court. I straightened. You appear prepared, she said slowly. Yet you declined to present anything. Yes. Why? Because if I open the door too early, I thought, he'll rush to close it. Aloud, I said, because once I start, I don't intend to stop. The room went still. Richard let out a sharp breath. She's playing games. The judge's eyes flicked to him. Mr. Hale, you will remain silent. Daniel leaned toward me and whispered, "You're doing fine." I nodded, though my pulse was racing. The clerk cleared her throat. Next witness for the plaintiff, Dr. Lowell Grant. I felt something shift inside me at the name. Dr. Grant walked in with the confidence of a man who'd never been challenged. He adjusted his tie, swore in, and smiled at the jury box that wasn't there, as if performing for an invisible audience. "Dr. Grant," Marcus said, "you reviewed the Hales' financial records?" "Yes." "And what was your conclusion?" "That Mrs. Hale demonstrated a pattern of excessive, unchecked spending inconsistent with long-term financial stability." "Unchecked." I stared at him. Marcus nodded. "In your expert opinion, did that behavior endanger the marital estate?" "Yes," the judge interjected. "Dr. Grant, were you provided complete records?" "Absolutely." "All accounts?" "Yes." "All entities?" "Yes," he repeated, a beat too fast. I felt it then, the small, unmistakable hitch. I leaned back slightly and exhaled through my nose. Daniel noticed. He glanced at me, raised an eyebrow. I gave the tiniest nod. Marcus finished quickly. "No further questions." The judge turned to Daniel. "Cross-examination?" Daniel stood, unhurried. "Dr. Grant, can you confirm the date range of the records you reviewed?" Dr. Grant smiled. "From the start of the marriage to 6 months prior to separation." Daniel tilted his head. "Interesting." Marcus frowned. Daniel continued. "So you did not review records from the final 6 months?" "No," Dr. Grant said. "They weren't provided." The judge looked up. "Why not?" Marcus opened his mouth. "Closed it." I felt my heart begin to pound, not with fear this time, but anticipation. The judge made a note. "Proceed, Mr. Reyes." Daniel smiled faintly. And for the first time since this began, I felt it. The room wasn't leaning toward Richard anymore. It was listening. The judge called a brief recess. People stood. Chairs scraped. Whispers filled the air. Richard leaned into Marcus, his voice sharp but low. I didn't try to hear them. I already knew the shape of his panic. It always came late, after he realized he wasn't in control anymore. Daniel touched my elbow. "You okay?" "Yes," I said. He studied me for a second. "You're ahead of them." "I know." When court resumed, the judge looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Reyes, you indicated earlier you wished to delay cross-examination." "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said. "We're prepared now." Marcus scoffed. "Prepared with what? More insinuations?" Daniel didn't answer him. He turned to the judge. "We'd like to enter supplemental exhibits." Marcus snapped upright. "Objection. These were not disclosed during discovery." Daniel nodded. "They were disclosed. Under seal." The judge paused. "Under seal?" "Yes," Daniel said. "At the court's request." The room went quiet. I felt Richard's eyes on me again. This time, not dismissive, not amused, searching. The clerk retrieved a sealed envelope from the evidence table. The same one that had been sitting there all morning, untouched, ignored. The judge held up a hand. "Before we proceed," she said, looking at me, "Mrs. Hale, I want to understand something." I straightened. "You left the marital home 6 months ago," she said. "Correct?" "Yes." "And during that time, you did not request temporary financial support?" "No." Marcus jumped in. "Which further proves—" "Enough," the judge said sharply. "Mrs. Hale, why?" I thought about that night. The quiet click of the door behind me. The way my phone stopped working by morning. "I needed time," I said, "to understand what I was walking away from." "And did you?" she asked. Yes. Marcus laughed once, bitter. If that were true, she wouldn't be sitting here empty-handed. I looked at him. I didn't leave with money. No, Marcus said. You left with excuses. I met his gaze. I left with copies. The judge's eyes narrowed. Copies of what? Everything I was allowed to touch, I said, and some things I wasn't. Richard stood. That's a lie. The judge's voice cut through his. Sit down, Mr. Hale. He didn't, at first. Those documents were proprietary, he said. Confidential. You'll sit, the judge said, or I'll have you removed. He sat. Daniel spoke gently. Your Honor, Mrs. Hale did not access anything illegally. She copied records she was authorized to view as a spouse and signatory. Marcus shook his head. She's spinning paranoia into conspiracy. I took a breath. I didn't know what I was looking at first, I said. I just knew I didn't understand our life. The judge watched me closely. Go on. I didn't know why I needed permission to buy groceries some months and not others, I said. Why the accounts changed names. Why the mail stopped coming to the house. Marcus rolled his eyes. Marital miscommunication. I enrolled in a night class, I said, cutting him off. The judge raised an eyebrow. A class? Basic accounting, I said. Community college. I sat in the back and learned how to read balance sheets. Richard let out a sharp breath. This is ridiculous. The judge ignored him. And then I learned what questions to ask, I said. Daniel stepped forward. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to recall Dr. Grant after reviewing these exhibits. Marcus stiffened. You can't just... The judge held up the sealed envelope. I can. She looked at the clerk. Do not open this yet. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge turned back to me. Mrs. Hale, one last question, for now. Yes? When you chose not to speak earlier, she said, was that strategy or fear? I didn't hesitate. Both. She nodded once. Very well. As the clerk called the next witness, I felt Richard's stare like heat on my skin. He leaned toward me and whispered, You think you're smarter than me? I didn't look at him. I think, I said quietly, you never needed me to be. He went still. The judge called order. And for the first time since I walked out of that house with a suitcase and a folder of papers I barely understood, I felt it. Not revenge. Momentum. Dr. Grant returned to the stand with less confidence than before. He adjusted his glasses twice before sitting down. Marcus leaned in close, whispering something urgent. Dr. Grant nodded, but his jaw stayed tight. Daniel stood, calm, unrushed. Dr. Grant, he said, earlier you testified that you reviewed complete financial records for the Hale marriage. Do you recall saying that? Yes, Dr. Grant said. And you also stated those records covered the entire duration of the marriage? Yes. Daniel glanced at the judge. Your Honor, may I proceed using Exhibit D? The judge nodded. You may. The clerk passed Daniel a document. He didn't look at it right away. Dr. Grant, Daniel said, can you explain what an SPV is? Dr. Grant blinked. A special purpose vehicle, a legal entity created for isolating financial risk, Daniel finished, often used to move money discreetly. Marcus stood. Objection. Relevance. Daniel didn't turn around. Dr. Grant reviewed SPVs tied to Mr. Hale's accounts. Marcus froze. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Answer the question. Dr. Grant cleared his throat. Yes. SPVs are commonly used in high net worth portfolios. Commonly disclosed? Daniel asked. Sometimes, Dr. Grant said carefully. Were they disclosed here? Dr. Grant hesitated. I felt my pulse spike. I reviewed what I was given, he said. Daniel nodded. Let's be specific. Did you review an entity called Northbridge Consulting LLC? Dr. Grant frowned. I don't recall that name. Daniel turned toward the judge. Your Honor, may I approach? She nodded. Daniel handed Dr. Grant a page. Does that refresh your memory? Dr. Grant's eyes scanned the paper. His lips parted slightly. That's a consulting entity, he said. Yes. And is it tied to Mr. Hale? Yes. And was it included in your original report? No. Marcus stood so fast his chair scraped loudly. Objection. This document was not part of discovery. Daniel finally turned. It was, filed under a different classification. The judge looked at the clerk. Confirm. The clerk typed quickly, then looked up. It was filed 6 months ago, under sealed financial supplements. Marcus stared at me. The judge turned back to Dr. Grant. Why wasn't this entity included in your analysis? Dr. Grant swallowed. It didn't appear relevant. Daniel tilted his head. Despite moving over $3 million in the last 18 months? A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Richard stood. That money isn't marital. The judge's voice snapped. Sit. Down. Richard sat, face flushed. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Dr. Grant, are you aware that Northbridge Consulting LLC was funded using marital accounts? Dr. Grant looked at Marcus. The judge noticed. Answer the question. Yes, he said quietly. And are you aware, Daniel continued, that my client's signature appears on the original funding documents? I felt the room tilt. Dr. Grant nodded. Yes. Then why? Daniel asked. Did you characterize Mrs. Hale as financially ignorant? Dr. Grant hesitated too long. Marcus cut in. Because she was. The judge slammed her pen down. Mr. Cole, you will not answer for the witness. Silence fell. Dr. Grant looked down. Because, he said slowly, the narrative presented to me was that Mrs. Hale was a passive participant. I felt something hot rise behind my eyes. Daniel stepped back. No further questions. The judge leaned forward. Dr. Grant, you're an expert witness. Your duty is to the court, not the party who hired you. Yes, Your Honor. Were you compensated by Mr. Hale directly? Yes. Were you made aware of any conditions attached to your testimony? Dr. Grant's mouth opened, closed. Yes. The gallery erupted in whispers. Richard looked at me now like he didn't recognize me at all. The judge turned to Marcus. Do you wish to redirect? Marcus stood, then sat back down. No, he said stiffly. The judge nodded. The court will take a brief pause to review the exhibits. As she rose, Richard leaned toward me, his voice low and shaking. You planned this. I met his eyes for the first time that day. No, I said. You did. He stared at me, breathing hard. As the judge exited, I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking anymore. When the judge returned, the room felt smaller. Not physically, nothing had moved, but the air was tighter, heavier. Like everyone understood, something irreversible was happening. Judge Whitman didn't sit right away. She stood behind the bench, flipping through the exhibits in silence. Richard couldn't stop tapping his foot. Before we continue, the judge said, finally sitting, I want clarity. Marcus straightened. Of course, Your Honor. She looked directly at Dr. Grant. You testified that certain entities were irrelevant to your analysis. I disagree. Dr. Grant nodded stiffly. Understood. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Reyes, you may proceed. Daniel stood. Dr. Grant, let's talk about timing. Timing? Dr. Grant echoed. Yes, Daniel said. Specifically, when Northbridge Consulting LLC began receiving funds. Dr. Grant glanced at his notes. Approximately 18 months ago. And what happened 18 months ago? Daniel asked. Dr. Grant hesitated. My client asked for access to marital accounts, Daniel said calmly. I felt the memory surge. I just want to understand, I'd said. You wouldn't even know what you're looking at, Richard replied. Dr. Grant cleared his throat. Yes, that appears to align. Daniel nodded. So immediately after Mrs. Hale requested transparency, significant funds were rerouted. Marcus stood. Objection. Correlation does not imply... The judge cut him off. I know what correlation implies, Mr. Cole. Sit down. Marcus sat. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Hale, did you authorize the creation of Northbridge Consulting LLC? No, I said. Did you sign documents related to it? Yes. Richard jumped up. She signed stacks of papers. She didn't read them. The judge fixed him with a stare. Mr. Hale, do you want me to hold you in contempt? He closed his mouth. I continued. I was told they were tax filings. Daniel stepped in. Dr. Grant, did you verify the purpose of those documents? No, Dr. Grant admitted. I assumed they were standard. Assumed, the judge repeated, writing something down. The clerk shifted in her seat. Your Honor. Yes? There's an additional discrepancy in the timeline. Marcus looked like he might be sick. What discrepancy? The judge asked. The initial funding transfer, the clerk said, was time-stamped on a Sunday. The room went still. Daniel frowned slightly. Banks don't process transfers on Sundays. The clerk nodded. Exactly. Marcus stood. That's a system delay. Sit, the judge said. I felt a slow, steady warmth spread through my chest. The judge looked at Dr. Grant. Can you explain the timestamp? Dr. Grant shook his head. No. She turned to Marcus. Can you? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. The judge removed her glasses. That timestamp, she said, doesn't exist. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Richard's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. Which means either the record is falsified or the transfer was manipulated to appear outside normal review windows. She paused. Either explanation is unacceptable. Marcus finally spoke. Your Honor, my client denies any wrongdoing. I didn't ask for denial, the judge said. I asked for explanation. She looked at Daniel. Continue. Daniel nodded. Dr. Grant, after reviewing these corrected timelines, do you still stand by your conclusion that Mrs. Hale was financially reckless? Dr. Grant swallowed. No. The word landed like a gavel. No, the judge repeated. No, he said again. Based on this information, her spending appears managed. Richard laughed sharply. This is absurd. The judge's voice hardened. What's absurd, Mr. Hale? Is your confidence. Silence followed. I felt it then. Not triumph, not joy, relief. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Hale, you said earlier that once you started, you wouldn't stop. Yes, she nodded. I believe you. Richard stared at me, his eyes wide now, not angry, afraid. As the clerk called the next witness, I leaned back in my chair. The numbers had turned, and they weren't going back. My brother had never been inside a courtroom before. I could tell by the way his shoulders stayed tense, like he was bracing for something to hit him. He wore the same navy jacket, he'd worn to my college graduation, the one that still smelled faintly of laundry soap. When the clerk called his name, he looked at me first. I nodded. "State your name for the record," the clerk said. "Evan Mercer," he replied. His voice was steady, surprising both of us. "And your relation to the defendant?" "I'm her older brother." Marcus stood immediately. "Your Honor, we object. This witness has no financial expertise." The judge didn't look at him. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." I allowed this testimony. Evan swallowed and took a breath. "I'm not here to talk about money," he said. "I'm here to talk about time." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Go on." Evan nodded. 6 months before Julia left the house, she started coming to my place every Thursday night. Same time, same reason. Marcus scoffed. "Irrelevant." "She brought papers," Evan continued. "Stacks of them. She'd sit at my kitchen table and ask me what words meant. She'd highlight things, ask why numbers didn't add up." I felt my throat tighten. "She didn't want revenge," he said. "She wanted clarity." Marcus rose again. "Objection. Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said. "Stick to observations." Evan nodded. "I observed her learning. I observed her panic when she realized how little she knew. And I observed her deciding not to confront Richard." That caught the judge's attention. "Why not?" Evan looked at me, then back to her. "Because she knew he'd hide it better." The courtroom was silent. Marcus shook his head. "This is dramatization." The judge turned to him sharply. "And yet, it aligns with the evidence." Evan stepped down. My mother was next. She walked slower, her hand trembling slightly, as she raised it to swear in. Richard didn't look at her at all. "Mrs. Mercer," the judge said gently, "you may speak." My mother folded her hands. "I raised my daughter to trust people," she said. "That's my fault." Richard finally looked up. "She used to call me crying," my mother continued, saying she felt stupid, small, like a guest in her own life. Marcus sighed loudly. The judge shot him a look. "One more sound, Mr. Cole." My mother went on. "The day Julia left, she didn't ask me for money. She asked me for dates." "Dates?" the judge repeated. "Yes," my mother said. "She wanted to know when her father died, when her inheritance was deposited, when it stopped appearing on statements." I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Marcus stood slowly. "Mrs. Mercer, are you suggesting my client intentionally—" "I'm suggesting," my mother said calmly, "that Julia trusted him, and he counted on it." The judge let the silence stretch. "Thank you," she said softly. "You may step down." As my mother returned to her seat, I felt something break open inside me. Not pain, strength. Marcus cleared his throat. "Your Honor, with respect, emotional testimony doesn't change financial facts." The judge nodded. "No, but it explains behavior." She turned to me. "Mrs. Hale, you said earlier you left with copies. Did you leave with witnesses too?" "Yes," I said. Richard finally stood, his composure gone. "This is a setup." The judge's voice was cold. "This is a reckoning." The clerk spoke up. "Your Honor, there's one more witness listed." Marcus froze. "There is no—" The clerk checked the file. "Former executive assistant to Mr. Hale." Richard's head snapped up. "She can't be here." I felt my heart start to race again, not with fear, with recognition. The door at the side of the courtroom opened, and in that moment, I understood something clearly for the first time. Richard hadn't just underestimated me. He'd underestimated everyone who loved me. I recognized her before she spoke. She stood just inside the doorway, shoulders squared like someone who'd practiced this moment in the mirror, and still wasn't sure it would work. Her hair was pulled back too tight. Her hands were empty. No notes, no bag. Just resolve. "State your name," the clerk said. "Lena Brooks," she replied. "Former executive assistant to Richard Hale." Richard stood so fast his chair tipped backward. "You can't allow this," he said. She signed an NDA. The judge didn't look at him. "Sit down." "She's violating a contract," Richard insisted. The judge finally met his eyes. "She's responding to a subpoena." Silence. Lena took the stand and raised her right hand. Her voice shook on the oath, then steadied. Marcus approached cautiously. "Ms. Brooks, you were terminated from your position, correct?" "Yes." "For cause?" "No." "For performance issues?" "No." Marcus frowned. "Why then?" "Because I asked a question," she said. The judge leaned forward. "What question?" Lena looked at me, then back at the judge. "Why Mrs. Hale's signature kept appearing on documents she was never copied on." The room seemed to inhale all at once. Marcus laughed nervously. "Speculation." "No," Lena said. "Documentation." Daniel stood. "Your Honor, may we open the sealed exhibit?" The judge nodded. "Proceed." The clerk broke the seal. I watched Richard's face as the contents were distributed. Emails, internal memos, annotated drafts. His jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Daniel spoke evenly. "Ms. Brooks, did Mr. Hale ever instruct you to exclude Mrs. Hale from correspondence?" "Yes." "How often?" "Always." Marcus snapped. "Objection. Hearsay." "Overruled," the judge said. "These emails speak for themselves." Lena continued. "He told me Julia didn't need details, that it confused her." I closed my eyes briefly. Daniel asked, "Did Mr. Hale ever instruct you to alter timestamps?" Lena hesitated. Richard whispered, "Don't." The judge's head snapped up. "Mr. Hale, one more word." Lena swallowed. "Yes." A gasp tore through the courtroom. "Which timestamps?" Daniel asked. "Transfers to entities not disclosed during quarterly reviews," Lena said. "He said they needed to appear outside normal scrutiny windows." The judge leaned back slowly. "Sunday timestamps?" "Yes." Marcus looked like he'd been punched. Daniel nodded. "Ms. Brooks, why come forward now?" Lena's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "Because I watched her sit in that chair for years and think she was stupid." She looked at me fully now. And she wasn't. The judge removed her glasses again. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "were you compensated for your silence?" "Yes." "How?" "Through consulting fees," Lena replied. "From Northbridge Consulting, LLC." Richard collapsed back into his chair. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Hale, do you have anything to say?" He opened his mouth, closed it. The judge nodded. "Very well." Marcus tried once more. "Your Honor, even if these allegations are—" The judge raised her hand. "Enough." She looked at me. "Mrs. Hale, earlier you said this wasn't the part where the truth speaks." "Yes." She gestured to the witness stand. "Is this the part?" I felt my chest tighten. Not with fear, not with anger. With release. "Yes," I said. The judge exhaled slowly. "Then the court will hear no further testimony today." She struck the gavel. Richard stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not as his wife, not as his mistake, as his consequence. As the courtroom began to empty, Lena passed by me. She paused. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I shook my head. "Thank you." When I stood to leave, my legs didn't tremble. Because the truth had done something it never did quietly. It spoke. The courtroom was quieter the final morning. Not empty, just stripped of confidence. Richard sat stiffly beside Marcus. No smile, no crossed ankle, no sense of ownership left in his posture. Papers lay scattered in front of them now, no longer neat, no longer untouchable. Judge Whitman entered without ceremony. "Please be seated," she said. I sat. My hands rested calmly on the table. That surprised me most of all. The judge looked down at her notes. "This court has reviewed the testimony, the supplemental exhibits, and the sworn statements submitted under seal." She paused. "In particular, the court finds credible evidence of deliberate financial obfuscation, coercive control, and material misrepresentation." Richard inhaled sharply. "Mr. Hale," she continued, "you characterize your wife as financially irresponsible. The evidence shows the opposite." She looked at me. Mrs. Hale demonstrated restraint, diligence, and, most notably, patience. Marcus stood. "Your Honor, even if mistakes were made." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down." Marcus sat. "The court awards primary custody to Mrs. Hale," the judge said, her voice steady, "with supervised visitation pending further review." A sound escaped Richard's throat, half laugh, half choke. "The court orders a full forensic audit of all marital and affiliated entities," she continued, "including Northbridge Consulting, LLC." Richard stared straight ahead now, unmoving. "Assets concealed or misrepresented will be reclassified as marital property." The gavel tapped once. I exhaled slowly. The judge wasn't finished. "Mrs. Hale," she said, turning to me, "you have the right to speak before we adjourn." The room seemed to lean toward me again, but this time not to watch me fail. I stood. I looked at Richard. Really looked at him. "I didn't come here to punish you," I said. "I came here to stop feeling small." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I trusted you," I continued, "and when that trust broke, I blamed myself for not knowing enough." I turned to the judge. "But ignorance isn't guilt, and silence isn't weakness." The judge nodded once. I faced Richard again. "You built a life where I didn't need to understand anything, until you needed me to understand nothing." Richard's eyes glistened. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I won't protect you anymore." The judge struck the gavel. "This court is adjourned." People stood. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Richard stayed seated. As I gathered my things, he spoke quietly. "You could have told me." I paused. "I did," I said. "You just never listened." I walked past him without another glance. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to prove anything. Daniel smiled at me. My brother wrapped me in a tight hug. My mother pressed her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. Justice didn't feel loud. It felt like standing upright after years of bending, like breathing without permission, like finally understanding that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits.